Hi, I'm Patty with Studio R12 Stencils, and today I'm going to show you 5 ways to varnish your projects with one bonus. Stay tuned. The very first thing that you want to know about when you are going to be varnishing your stencils is you have to start with a project that's smooth. And if we listen, you can hear quite a bit of junk, like raised bits of paint and stuff. So I'm going to give this project a quick little sanding that I don't want to remove anything. So I'm going to use a really high grit. This is a 400 grit, and I actually think I'm going to switch it to a higher grit. This one is a 2000 grit. So when you use a really high grit, it's just going to knock back some of the little raised bits, but it won't knock your paint back. And if I stop right here and you listen again, and then listen here. Big difference. So that just makes all the difference in the world. It doesn't let your varnish stick to those higher places. And it's almost like when you lay down dirt on top of dirt, you can make a mound. That's what happens when you lay down varnish or paint on top of other things. It makes kind of a little paint mound or a varnish mound. So you can see a little bit of scratching. Just a teeny bit. Like it's very, 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 very minimal. Okay, dust off anything that is on the surface. You can use a paper towel or a lint-free cloth. But notice what happens when you wet an area that you've sanded. Okay, when you wet that area, that will remove any of the little scratches. So when I'm varnishing, I don't have to worry about that because the varnish is going to do the wetting for me. Okay, so if you need to see whether or not they'll go away, then you can do it, with just a little bit of water on there. But I don't think I'm going to have a problem. Okay, so we're going to use a DecoArt product today, DecoArt Americana. It's a craft brand available in all the good craft stores. This is DuraClear, and it's a matte varnish, and it is a polyurethane. Polyurethanes are good for indoor and outdoor, and matte is one of my favorites. I don't use satin or gloss very often, but when you need a gloss or you need a little satin, a little sheen to something, it's good to know that these exist. The varnish all starts off in gloss format, and they put matte fillers, I guess, in them to make them be matte. So you want to make sure that if you're using matte that you are shaking your varnish. You can shake it this way. You can do it on the table. I just shake it. I haven't had problems with bubbling myself. Okay, so we'll put out some varnish, and now we're going to show you a couple of ways to apply varnish. I'm going to break this project up into some areas, some different sections, so that you can see the different ways and how that works. Okay, so number 1, I've got my list over here. We're going to brush our varnish. So when you're brushing your varnish, you want to use a soft brush, and this is a oval glaze brush, and it's got a nice taper to it, and it's also tapered this way. If I used a square brush, these corners on a square brush are going to give me raised ridges really easily, so I don't want that. And then I'm a big fan of always starting with a moist applicator. So you just get it in water, dry it out, and then you can pick up your varnish and go. I'm going to show you this technique up here in this area because this is the one technique that applying varnish with a brush is the easiest way to get ridges. So I just want you to see what happens if you don't do the steps to prevent the ridging. Okay, so we're going to go here. If I stop and get busy and take a phone call, you can see there's a big old giant ridge right there, okay? So what I have to do to prevent that is I have to keep my paintbrush moving, and I have to go next door to this wetland right here while it's wet. And I'm gonna actually let that start drying. If you go into this area while it's tacky dry, so it's still a little wet, but it's kind of tacky, you'll make these pull marks, and they're really, really ugly, and we don't like them. Okay, so I'm gonna go in here, and then I'm gonna see if I can get you some pull marks. Well, yeah, that's got some nice pulling going on right there. We'll let that dry, and then we'll see that. So I'm gonna put this applicator away. So what you need to do, I'm gonna summarize this. You keep your brush moving, you start with the moist applicator, and then you just keep going and get your whole surface done before it starts drying. If you dry, stop, let it dry, pick it back up, and continue on from there. So this is pretty dry, and you can see it's got just a little bit of kind of sketchy pull right there. If we can get that going. We have a video for how to sand between your varnish levels. And you'll probably want to check that video out if you want to do really primo, ultra fine, ultra professional varnish techniques. Number 2. We're going to roll our varnish. Okay, rolling varnish is really an interesting technique. I'm going to get a little bit more. When you first apply your varnish with a roller, your roller is going to suck up a lot of that medium. I tend not to use rollers unless I have a fairly good sized project and I know I'm going to be doing layers of something, like some of these tall porch signs behind me. If I knew I wanted to base coat that with, like, say, a brown or that orange or whatever, I would use a roller for that because they're so large and I know I'm going to do multiple. But this is a really neat technique, and there's a couple of things to know about it, so I think it's really good for this video. Okay, that is needing a blow dryer. Okay, so I'm going to show you the secret to using a roller for varnishing. Load your medium. And you want to kind of squish it pretty good on there. And then you always, when using a roller, you always offload it. And make sure to pay attention to your 2 edges because they can collect a lot of medium on them. And then that makes little ridge builders. Okay, so then when we're varnishing with a roller, you'll notice the very first thing that you see is a very pebbly surface. So what you want to do when you're varnishing is keep rolling. Okay, so kind of get it all over. And while it's still wet, no pressure, roll it, and it will flatten out all those little bubbles. Okay, and that is the secret to applying varnish with a roller. Okay, number 3, you can use a polyfoam applicator to apply your varnish. Okay, now what you want to be careful of, this one is falling apart. And that means it's going to kind of be a little wobbly there. It's gonna not have firm texture. And you wanna make sure you don't have any hardened bits. This looks stained. It looks like it might have hardened bits, but it actually is in fine shape. So then what you do is you wet your applicator. That's just the common thread with this technique. And I think it's the missing thread. I think it's the one thing they don't teach you, they don't talk about. And I've been teaching painting for a long time. And that's not something that I came by naturally. I had to kind of work to get that technique. Okay, so I'm going to load my varnish. Always good idea just to offload some. And then we'll just go over here. And the same thing as with the roller, you just keep it moving. And that just does a really good job. That'll wash out nicely from your applicator. And then nice big long finishing streaks. If you're in the heat of summer, if you're in, I have a fan over here because this room tends to be a little stuffy. Don't have your fans on while you're varnishing because that will just force dry. Don't sit under an air conditioner. Don't have a fan going overhead. You definitely want to watch your conditions. So if you're in Arizona in the middle of summer, where your house temperature might be hotter, go ahead and do your varnishing either in the early morning or in a cool air-conditioned room. Number 4 way to apply your varnish is with a wet sponge. And this kind of comes with a little bit of a extra technique. So I like these little, we call them base coat sponges. Once again, you get your water in there and you can squeeze that out nice and dry and tight. And then what I like to do, you can use this just like this, and I'll show you that. I'll do it right down here. You're going to want to do big strokes. Anything that's a sponge, you want to do big movements. Okay, so that works very nicely, but I like it even better when I wrap it with a wet paper towel. Okay, so I wrung that out. And now I can wrap that in there. It just does such a neat, smooth, applique-y job. Okay, so get that nice, and it's almost like a little puff. So we'll come back up here And when you're doing your application, that goes on so flat and so smooth. It's like it's pre-leveling itself. It is just a really, really excellent way to apply your varnish. Number 5 technique, and this is kind of a cheater one, it's spray varnish. So I don't know if you know this, but all matte paints that you can buy, whether it be house paints or your craft paints, can be chalk paint. So if I wanted to continue to be able to chalk on top of this, so this is a Christmas countdown. This is only this many days before Christmas. If I want to be able to chalk on top, get my little chalky chalk out. So I can be like, 5 days before Christmas. Then what I'm going to need to do is keep it in a matte finish, like a really matte. So those of you who are in love with chalk paint, you can use a matte varnish, a spray varnish. I like the Krylon, and this is the 1311. Those are the magic numbers you want to remember, 1311. I have been using this for what seems like hundreds of years, but it's only been decades. So this is just a fabulous finish, and that will keep the matte so matte that you won't have to worry about chalking afterwards. And then also this just saves you a lot of money. Not buying special chalk products. You don't need them. So what you do with this, they've got that little ball thing. You always want to read the instructions on the can, so do that. But you want to make sure that you get that super, super, super shook up, because once again, that matting piece is going to be important to your finish. So we're going to shake it, lots and lots, like 2 or 3 minutes of shaking. Then we're going to put this outside in a well-ventilated place. If you've got a rainy day, maybe inside your garage with the door up, maybe a fan blowing to disperse. You can also use a respirator. And so I'll lay this on top of something to block the overspray. Then I will take the lid off, and then I'm going to keep my can 12 inches and just go in gentle path that way. I'll turn it and 12 inches this way as well. And then that should be good enough for what I'm doing. If you were giving this to, a house full of kids where you knew it was gonna get rough and tumble in there, you might do double the amount of coats. So do 4 coats instead of just 2. And that'll protect everything and keep it all solid. All right, and here is the last tip. And this is kind of a little sneaky surprise bonus. Natural wax, this is Min Wax finishing paste. And this is just a paste wax. You can use a food grade one too as well, but you can just use this instead of varnishing, and you can use it on top of your varnish. So wax ends up making your finish super chip resistant, and it just makes it feel warmer and smoother. So it's a really lovely finish. It's not for every time at all places, but it is a wonderful way to do the final finish. I've got a cheater tip for, this is a glove. It's just a little baggie. I keep one of these varnish base coat sponges inside the wax. Just gonna pick up some wax, knock off the loose bits, and then you just apply it. I'm gonna apply it to half so you can kind of see what the finish is. And then there's one thing that you need to know is the buffing step is the stage where you want to be careful about, if you want to keep it matte, you have to not do so much buffing, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I was just lightly buffing, I would just do something like that. If I wanted to get into it, I could really buff, and then what that does is you can see that gives it quite a bit more sheen. So if you want that effect, then that is how you get that effect. I'm just going to even this out. Okay, that concludes our 5 ways to varnish your craft projects. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell, and we'll see you in the next video.